This video will be going over how to input a listing into the MLS, which is fairly simple to do actually, and we'll start by going to the top of the page under the drop down of input/edit. If you want to click on that, it'll have a few different options. This is for you to be able to not just input a listing, but this is the same tab that you go to if you want to edit a listing that you already have, whether or not you want to change the description, whether or not you want to add an open house or something like that. This is where you would go to do it. So it'll have your drop down list of the properties you have in this particular MLS ready for you to edit if you need to. But we're going to go ahead, and this is about adding a listing as well. So go to this. Gives you the various different types of inputs that you could do. We're going to just cover the residential listing input, since if you can do that one, you can definitely do the rest. On the left-hand side, you actually have to choose the county. So the county is required. We're just going to be using the same listing that I've been using as an example, 23 Gold Street. So we know that that is in Middlesex County. And this is going to be pulling from the tax record and the database to be able to pull information on the property. So what it's doing on this page is it wants you to actually fill out the address to the property. So it's in Middlesex County. Street number is 23, street name is Gold Street, and this should be enough information for them to search for. You can also use the owner's first name and last name if you need as well, or tax ID. So it pulls up as the owner's name, the tax year, city, address, tax ID, and then what you want to do in this section is fill. Now, if this information is incorrect for whatever reason, or if you don't like the information that it's pulling, you can always go from start with a blank listing, and it won't pull from all the information that you have. I don't recommend doing this unless you absolutely have to, because it pulls a lot of helpful information that would be redundant for you to do, or you could potentially get some information wrong as you're transferring it from the tax record to this listing. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to hit fill, as long as that's the person and property that we're looking for. Under general section, you don't have to fill these out in order. So if you don't know something, you could always go back to it later by going to save as incomplete, or validate will attempt to check to make sure that you have everything filled out correctly. Because if you don't have all the yellow boxes checked out from each one of these tabs of general, going to agent office all the way to remarks, if you don't have everything filled out properly, it is going to put up a red flag, and you're going to have to fill it out prior to you being able to move forward. So the first information is list date. So you go ahead and input the listing date. You can't really go back and say if you wanted to list it 2 days ago or 3 days ago. You can't typically do that without getting into some trouble with the MLS. There's situations where you can do it from yesterday's date, or if you're putting it in from today's date and the listing agreement was from yesterday, it's usually okay because you can put it up within 24 hours or so. So that's not a problem. But anything you can list it in the future if you want to, but it's just going to prompt you to submit the listing when you're actually ready to put it up. So you go for the listing date. We could just assume that's for today. You need a form filled out for if the showing date is any date different from the listing date, and that'll be under your dot-loop training, under documents that you need when you're going through dot-loop and you're creating a folder or creating a file for this particular property. It'll have a document that says delay in showings, and delay in showings is going to be something you need if, again, the list date is different than the showing date. Expiration date is that's going to be on the listing agreement. So however long you have the listing agreement you have to submit that as well. Just basic information like the property type. I shouldn't have to explain that to you any further. You should know pretty much everything there is to know about the house. Is there an attached addendum to the property? So yes or no, if you have an alternative commission agreement or something like that. If it's in an adult community or not. type of ownership, whether it's fee simple or condo or co-op or any of the other various ones. Once you're done filling this out, you can go to Agent and Office. And it already populates your information as well as the broker's information as well, so that ends up being helpful. If you do have a co-listing agent, this is where you would find their information and populate it. It pulls from the tax record, so it already knows the owner's name. This one just happens to be under an LLC. If you do want to change that name, you can always put it as like withheld. If you don't want to have the client's information out there, you don't have to, but you have to change it to withheld. It can't just be left blank since it's one of the yellow boxes. The commission amount goes here as well. Alternative commission agreement, you have to say whether or not there is one. If there is an alternative commission agreement, meaning if you say like, okay, if you sell it yourself, or if you sell the property, you're doing it for 5%. If you sell it yourself, you'll reduce it to 4%. If that's the case, then you have to check off yes, and you do have to have an addendum signed for that to be able to happen. Any deductions made to the sub-agents or buyer's agents or transaction brokers that you're working for, they have a very specific way that you want it filled out. If you look at my screen, you have to put the minus sign, you have to put the dollar sign, you have to put the amount, even if it is zero. But again, it's something that it's going to prompt you to do. If you don't fill it out correctly, it'll let you know. Waiver, broker, cooperation, whether you have that. MLS circulation, whether or not you want it on the MLS. The IDX, meaning do you want it to display on the internet, which most people do. Then you would check that off as yes as well. It's already pre-filled as such. Distributions, it lets you choose for Realtor.com, websites, Zillow, all that stuff. So if you want it displayed on all those sites, make sure those are checked out. Internet address, yes or no. So it just says, do you want the address for the property displayed on the internet? Again, if you say yes to all of these things, you should, but it's going to be up to your client. How you show the property or how the property is to be shown. Our office uses showing time. So if you're going to be using showing time for this particular listing, you definitely want to have it checked off. And showing instructions, visible only to showing time. So you want to, put in the instructions, whether it's a combo lockbox, Middlesex Supra, how long, of time between requests that you'd like to have, like that kind of stuff. Any lockbox combo information, you definitely want that there too. Going to location, financial. So this all populated from the tax record. So it's good. You don't have to put the lot or block number in. You want to put the listing price, the annual taxes it pulls from the past year, your 2018, all this stuff. So again, you can fill out as much as you want. Property disclosure, whether or not you have one. Street type, you have to say whether it's an avenue, street, way, terrace, anything like that. Possession at closing, or possession at what point. Finance, what the acceptable means of finance are. So having all that filled out, again, anything highlighted in yellow, that absolutely has to be filled out. Map, you can go and click on the map where the property is. So it'll just have that populated as well. So if somebody's looking for it, it'll automatically just have like the street and where it lies on the street. Room info, this is where you put the number of bedrooms, bathrooms, half baths, rooms, and all this is just the stuff that you're going to be seeing on the MLS. So anything that you're normally used to seeing on the MLS, this is where you input that information. If you have the room dimensions, that's great. A lot of agents don't end up having that. But if you do, it definitely makes your page look more professional. Makes it easier for people to be able to see whether or not the house could work for them. You could have somebody with a client that is very particular and wants a certain size bedrooms and dimensions for dining rooms and living rooms especially. So if you do have that information, it's going to help, weed out some of the less serious clients, or if, the property's not going to work for that person, they'll probably just avoid showing altogether because they'll say, oh, this property is definitely not going to work for my client. It's where you check off for level 1, 2, 3. So any level of the house where there is bedrooms or bathrooms or dining room. You can check off as many of these as you want. You could have one bedroom on the first floor, if it's a 2-level house, and you have 2 more on the second floor. That might be like something like a Cape Cod or something like that. But all this information shows up on the MLS. And again, the more information you have, the better your page will read. As I'm sure you guys are aware at this point, you look at certain pages and they're completely filled out and it looks great. And it's definitely a lot of information that you can get over to your client. And then you see other people's pages where it's like barely filled out at all. And it's like you have to call and ask that agent for questions. So again, like having all this filled out the best that you can is going to, eliminate at least some useless conversations that you would end up having trying to explain stuff a bunch of times. It's another page of you have to manually put in how many stories are in the building. So if it's a ranch, it's probably 1 story. If it's colonial, it's at least 2. Style of the home you have to check off. Level information, unit of house, like again, how many levels. Driveway description, how many car widths it has. So you definitely want to say, like if it is a 1 car width, but it could also, be gravel, and it could be a blacktop. There could be additional parking back there. Garage spaces, you have to actually input the number, check off whether there's a basement or not, and then again below this, you can input as much information about the basement as you'd like. Fireplace, whether there is one or not, how many. Interior features, again, we don't have to read through all of this, but the more information that you have on the property, the better. And this should be like a lesson if you didn't look at this video prior to getting a listing or going on a listing appointment. You should definitely get familiar with what you need to be able to input in the system. So when you're on a listing appointment, even if you have a client that you're like, okay, they're definitely going to list with me. Looking at this video, understanding what you actually need is going to help you from having to call the homeowner a bunch of times. And sometimes it ends up being embarrassing that you signed with the property, with the client, they want you to list their property. They're going to pay you 5%, to end up doing it, which can be a sizable amount of money. And then you're calling and asking them, oh, what was what was this feature on the house, or what was that feature? How old was this? How old was that? They probably already told you, and if you didn't write it down, you don't have all this information. You're going to have to go back to them. And there's nothing wrong with asking for information. It's definitely better to have the correct information than to not ask your client at all. But asking in advance definitely makes you look better and look more professional as well. So we won't go through the rest of this page, but know that it's all of the features for the property, both interior and exterior. Community and fees. This is where you're going to be able to put the community information. You're going to use this a lot, for like condos and townhomes and whatnot, where there is a management company, where there are maintenance fees, that whole gig. So like you want to check off, the fees and what they're included, the different amenities and whatnot. You can go on the association's website, and most of the time they'll just have the list of everything, but definitely ask the homeowners as well, because you want to hear it from them. They're the ones that live in the community. If the management got rid of something and it's still on the site, maybe you didn't know that, but the homeowners would. So definitely check both sources. If it's an adult community, you have to put the criteria, the minimum age required. You can find that out by either calling the association and get the association contact information, get the management company from the client themselves. You can also probably find it on their website, but get the number that everybody in the community that lives there uses, because you're going to eventually need to contact the association at some point in the transaction and let them know that you're going to be, selling the property, that you have an offer on the property, and somebody's going to have to get in touch with them regarding the mortgage and the condo questionnaire. Whether or not they have pets, again, look on their website, call the association, ask the homeowner. Asking the homeowner is great for a lot of this stuff. If you're very familiar with the community already and you already know, then you might not have to do that. But if you are unfamiliar with the community, definitely ask the homeowner. But also when it comes to like pets and all this stuff, call the association, find out what it actually requires, because the last thing you want is halfway through the transaction, after you have an accepted offer, somebody coming to you and saying like, I have a dog that's 60 pounds and this community only lets dogs up to 40 pounds. They don't even allow my breed. I cannot move forward with this property. You told me that there was no pet restrictions, and now I find out that there is. And that happens from time to time. So you don't want to go all the way through a transaction just to have it fall apart when it's something that you should have informed them prior. Utility information, again, this is something that you should be finding out prior to listing the home. You would want all of this information given to you. You can have your client fill out a seller's disclosure, and it'll help you be able to answer pretty much all the questions that you would have to fill out on this sheet. But definitely, like, if you don't have the seller's disclosure filled out by your clients yet, make sure you're getting all this information, like what the heating system is, how old it is, the cooling system, like if they have one, if it's wall units, what they have for it, the fuel for the property, utilities, and if they're underground or above ground. If they have a sewer, is it a septic tank? Is it public? Is public available? Services, like, is garbage included in the tax? It's not always for each town. Trash removal, snow removal, stuff that might be just included in association for a condo or a townhome. All this stuff is important to know. The remarks section is where you're going to, this is all the information that actually displays publicly. So when you go on Zillow, Trulia, Realtor.com, any of those sites, you'll notice that the clients don't have access to everything. That's why they need a realtor for the most part, not just their guidance, but also the information. Most information about the property is private and not displayed on the internet. This is one of the pages where half of it's going to be displayed, and it shows. It says remarks for buyers, remarks for buyers too. These are just both sections that are going to appear under the property description on Zillow as just one of the sites, or Realtor.com. Anything in licensee note under blue, it's only going to show up on the MLS sheet. So if you're doing a description of the property in the blue boxes, just know that that's pretty much useless, because you want all information that you want displayed on the internet in the two green boxes. And that's going to give you more characters to work with anyway. Like for the first one, you have 324, and then you have 650, and both of these will appear on the various sites. Exclusions, this will appear on the MLS sheet. Directions will appear on the MLS sheet. And again, the two blue sections will only be for the licensee. So if there's specific notes that you want to give to them, like, if it is a property that is in distress or needs a complete renovation, you might put in this section, TLC needed for the property needs repair, something that you wouldn't want your clients, your client wouldn't want out there on the internet. This is where you would put it, under this section. And after you have everything filled out, you're going to hit submit listing. And as you can see, since I didn't fill anything out, it has the red flags or the exclamation points under each tag or by each tag. And then once you go there, it'll show you the ones that you haven't filled out. And then you simply go through, and even if you think you filled everything out when you submit it, sometimes you miss stuff just because there's a lot of information to input. So you could always miss something. But when you do have it, it's going to prompt you to the next step, submit the listing. It might have one or two more questions that'll be pretty intuitive for you. And then once you're doing that, the listing will show up online. And then don't be afraid if you haven't seen the section to actually upload the pictures. That comes after you have it submitted. So when you do submit the property and it gets listed, you can go back to input and edit, select the listing, and that's when you'll have the option to manage the photos, manage attachments. So if you have a lead-based paint form or seller's disclosure, if that's what's required, you can then manage attachments, add the attachments, and upload them so that they're accessible in the MLS. Again, you'd only want lead-based paint and seller's disclosure and maybe another disclosure if needed for this particular property, but you do not put listing agreements. You do not put any private information, no CISs, no nothing. Also in the input edit, this is where you change it to attorney review. This is where you change it to under contract. This is where you take it off the market temporarily, withdrawn, change to close, extend the listing, open houses. All of this stuff is managed through input and edit once it's uploaded. And there you have it. That is how you input a listing, but also how you manage it along the way during the transaction, how you add open houses and whatnot to it. So there you go, and that should be it for this video. Thanks.